Hey guys, Pastor Ben here with another review and reflection. Today I want to talk about this book, Traditional English Gardens. This is written by Arabelle Lennox-Boyd, Clay Perry, and Graham Stuart Thomas. I'm going to make this video much shorter than my last review video. This is another book that I got from our local library as I've been just scheming and dreaming about gardening stuff as we're stuck in the middle of winter right now. And as someone who used to live in England and had the chance to visit some English gardens and is now looking to recreate on a very small scale some of the features that were in those English gardens. I saw this book and thought, oh, this will be great to help me learn about what makes an English garden an English garden. As I read through this book, I did enjoy it, although it was not what I thought it was going to be. Again, picked it up thinking this is going to help me understand the kind of design features of an English garden, and it did help me towards that end, but this book is actually trying to do something a little bit different. So what is this book about? Well, first off, it's put out by the National Trust, which those of you who are familiar with England will know is an organization that owns and manages many properties, old estates and things that are now held by the National Trust. They're open to the public. These are places usually that belonged to the aristocracy in England back in the day. Some of them are still privately owned, but many of them have come into the care of the National Trust, and that kind of pulls together resources and funding to allow these to be restored and maintained. And often, these buildings would have extensive gardens. And so the National Trust has a really important role to play in preserving and promoting the history and heritage of English great houses and, of course, great gardens. And so what this book is in essence a kind of pictorial tour of many of the properties of the National Trust. Now, a couple things to say about this. First off, this book is pretty dated at this point. It's almost 40 years old. It's published in 1986, and so that means the properties, I'm sure, look different today than they did when this was written. There's probably some properties that they included in this book that they wouldn't now, and probably some that they would include now that aren't included. Also, the photographs. Of course, any garden book like this, photographs are going to be very important. The photographs are still quite beautiful, but of course they're almost 40 years old. Photography has changed and things, so just recognize that when you're picking up the book. But what this book does, in essence, is to, after a very short introduction, basically walks us through many of the gardens that are run and operated by the National Trust. So let me just give you an example here. They have here, you can see the name of the place, Ascot, and the location of it, Buckinghamshire. And it'll give you a kind of one paragraph explanation of the features of the garden and the property as a whole. If there's anything about the history or things like that, they'll kind of walk you through that. And then often they'll give other pictures from the garden. But as you can see, like in that example, that first one, all that you get to see of Ascot is this picture, the topiary here, which is beautiful and it's impressive. But what you have is a kind of, better part of a page of kind of dense text, one picture, and then we're on to another property, Benthall Hall in Shropshire, right? So again, we have our explanation. Now here, you actually get a little bit more. So you'll see we get a kind of close-up picture and an explanation here. Close-up picture, explanation here. This captures what I liked and what I didn't like about the book. So when they did this, when they actually took the time to say, okay, rather than just giving you an overview, we're going to take a picture and then explain what you're looking at and why it works, right? How the lavender works with the yew trees, how the folly in the background and the stones here create a space. They kind of are drawing out those design features. That to me was very interesting and what I was hoping the whole book would be. But I think they just tried to cover way too many gardens in this one book. It's less than 150 pages, and I don't know how many, I didn't count up the gardens, but it seems like they're probably trying to cover 100 gardens or more. I think it would have been way more interesting to pick, 30 of the best examples and give us, a couple of pages where we can get some close-up pictures, walk us through what's going on in the pictures, why it's working, and all of that. But because they're trying to cover so many different properties, you end up just getting a kind of literally and figuratively just a snapshot of a whole bunch of them. And especially just looking through it, they end up just running together in your mind. Again, I think probably in 1986, something like this made some sense because it kind of gave you a way of just getting that snapshot. Today we've got Wikipedia, and I can look up these properties and probably get a couple of pictures and some explanation, which is in essence what this is. So I don't know how valuable this book is today. Things have obviously changed, right? That's not necessarily a critique of the book as such, but just saying, heads up for readers, it may not be quite what you're wanting it to be. But it was an interesting way of kind of getting an overview of the different properties and seeing, from a design perspective, how distinctive and how broad that category of English garden can be. It's not just one look, it's not just one approach. So I did find it to be a fun read. It was just something that I kind of had by the bedside for a little while and was able to just kind of leaf through and enjoy, get some inspiration from. But overall, there's probably better books if you're looking for something that's going to kind of help you understand or create an English garden. But that said, a book worth looking at if you can get it from the library, Traditional English Gardens.